Hey guys, this is Coach Goodrich. I'm going to go ahead and upload part B of Africa from my 6th grade Heritage Studies group. If you have not watched part A, stop it now. Go back and watch part A. This is all going to be on my YouTube and going to be part of the new digital learning that we're having to do because of the COVID-19 outbreak. So here we go, talking about the specific people of Northern Africa. Several different people groups existed in Northern Africa, such as the Carthaginians. Hopefully you guys remember Hannibal and the like from the Punic Wars. And the Berbers, who are going to live in the deserts of that region. The most important are going to be a type of nomadic people called the Tuaregs. Tuaregs are going to be called the blue people for their dark-stained, blue-stained cotton robes. They're going to be used to protect them from the sun and from the heat and from the sand. They're going to be traders, herdsmen, farmers, nomadic people who are going to use the camels to travel across the desert, settling next to oases throughout the region. They still live in Algeria, Mali, Niger, Mauritania, Burkina Faso, and Libya. Here are some examples of the blue people, some modern examples of the Tuaregs with their camels, more people with the blue headdresses, and some goats in the back. People of Central Africa, these are going to be the people who live in the savannas of Central Africa that are going to speak the Nilotic languages taken from the Nile River, people traveling down there to settle in the middle region of the continent. These people are going to move from South Sudan into Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and the most famous group settling here are the Maasai. The Maasai are going to be mostly herders. Cattle is their primary symbol of wealth. Their like monetary symbol of wealth. So the more cows you have, the more powerful you are, the more wealthy you are, the better off in society you are. Another interesting thing is that the Maasai boys have to prove their worth by living alone in the wilderness for days on end, sometimes up to a week. They have a rite of passage when they are about 12 or 13. They go off into the wild and they have to hunt and fish and provide water for themselves and all around survive in order to become men in the community. And the Maasai still live on animal reserves and surrounding areas in Kenya today. If you have some Maasai females on the left, Maasai males, warriors with the traditional blood red clothes on the right. Here's an example of some of the young Maasai who are competing in like a form of like almost like the Olympics, these warrior games where they're going to wrestle and throw spears and shoot bows and arrows and run and jump and see who's the fittest, who's the strongest, and what groups of the warriors are the best from the different tribes in the surrounding region. The people of Southern Africa, originally going to be settled by the Bantu. The Bantu is the most widely spoken language or root language in all of Africa, especially in the south, as the people move down to South Africa. Area is going to be inhabited by the Pygmies, the Bushmen, and the Khoikhoi. They're all going to be primarily hunters and gatherers. Eventually, in the late 15 and early 1600s, the Dutch from the Netherlands and the English are going to settle and establish permanent colonies in South Africa, the modern-day country of South Africa, and their descendants still live there to this day. These are the white Africans in that region, and they're going to speak a Dutch-African hybrid language called Afrikaans. So you see some of the Pygmies, known for their short size. On the left, on the right, you see the Bushmen and their bush-like houses, which really get that name, and the Dutch, representation of the Dutch settling and interacting with the first of the native South Africans in the early 1600s. The Aksum Empire, we actually kind of talked about already during the Egypt portion of our notes at the very beginning of the year. They're going to have a lot of interactions with the Egyptians, with the kingdom of Kush or Nubia, the Nubians, as we talked about during that part as well. They're going to be located in the modern-day nation of Ethiopia. Going to be very, very wealthy, but also very mysterious, high up in the mountains, kind of isolated from everybody else. They're going to trade precious metals, incense, gold, ivory, ebony, and elephants with Egyptians, Arabs, and Europeans. They're going to have interactions with the Greeks, which is where we get to know a little bit about them already from some of the Greek scholars and historians who wrote things down about them, thought very highly of them. And they're going to have their own written language, which makes them very unique in African history, called Ge'ez. Most famous king was King Ezana. He is the most famous because he became a Christian and he made it the official religion of the empire, which gives the Aksumite Empire the distinction of being the first Christian nation in the world. Ethiopia is still a very Christian nation today. However, not nearly as powerful. After Egypt and Kush are going to be conquered by the Muslim armies, it's going to further isolate Aksum from the rest of the world, effectively ending its power and forcing them to live in hiding in the mountainous regions of Ethiopia, which is located right here in the highlighted portion. You can see Aksum high up in the Ethiopian plateau, right next to Kush and Egypt. This is a zana with some of the traditional Ge'ez writing on the outside of this coin. And this is an example of the stele type architecture, which is taken probably from Kush, who probably took it from Egypt and modified it a little bit to celebrate. These are monument tombs to celebrate the lives of some of their most powerful and famous kings in Aksum. Now we're going to talk about several of the more powerful Western African societies. The first one is the Ghana Empire. The West Coast is also known as the Gold Coast, like I said earlier, because of the abundance of gold mines. The Ghana Empire is going to start along the Niger River around the 300s. It is going to become very powerful because of three major things. It is an oasis on the edge of the desert, which means there's water, very important. It's going to be very, very close to gold mines, so they're going to be able to control that trade. And it's also going to be able to control the trade of salt. Salt, not just for flavoring or seasonings, also used as a preservative. They didn't have refrigerators or ice boxes back then, so they had to find ways to preserve, other ways to preserve their food, and salt was the primary way of doing that. So if you can have water and control that trade, you have gold and control that trade, and control the trade of salt, the major way of preserving your food to make it last longer, you're going to be very, very powerful. And these kings they became very wealthy by charging a tax on all of those items as they were traded. Arabian merchants are going to bring Islam to that region, and a lot of the natives are going to adopt it in order to get better deals during trading, and they're going to form these weird hybrid religions between the polytheistic, naturalistic beliefs, that they traditionally held, and the Islamic beliefs as well. Eventually, the Mali Empire is going to conquer Ghana and the surrounding lands in the 1200s. And each time that you see one of these, it's actually going to, this little green shaded area is actually going to get a little bit bigger with each one, with the Mali and then the Songhai, as they each expand and conquer throughout the ages. So each one of these little dots here on the trade routes is not just a city, but it's also an oasis. They have fresh water readily available. Very, very important if you're going to build an empire in the middle of a desert. The Mali Empire are going to come in control with the help of Mansa, or ruler Sundiata. He's also known as the Lion King in the 1200s. And after conquering Ghana, the Mali took over control over all of their natural resources and trade. So their gold trade, ivory trade, salt trade, like we talked about earlier, are very, very important for this part of the world. People are described as being very peaceful, loving justice and mercy by some of the Arabic explorers who come to that region and merchants who come to that region. Now, their most famous king was a guy named Mansa Musa, who is a legend in a lot of African history and in world history as well. He's regarded by some as one of the richest men in all of human history, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So you see the Mali Empire taking the Ghana Empire and then expanding it a little bit all the way out to the western coast, the Atlantic Ocean. This is a representation of one of the more important cities, Timbuktu, which we'll talk more about with the Songhai Empire. Sundiata, the Lion King of Mali, because of his strength and courage, is going to have a lot of little fables and legends written about him, told about him, because of his prowess in battle and his good leadership. And this is Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa is pictured here holding a gold orb. This writing is actually in Arabic. Now, the reason we know so much about him is because he, and some of his records suggest, upwards of 60,000 in his caravan took a journey, a pilgrimage, to the holy city in Islam of Mecca, which is in Saudi Arabia, to pay homage to the birthplace of Muhammad, like all good Muslims are supposed to do at least one time in their life. And on their way over there, they carry huge amounts of gold. Slaves are carrying 80 pounds of gold bars. Camels are carrying 300 pounds of gold dust. Just unbelievable. And they're passing it out to everybody that they see on the side of the road. They're causing massive inflation and economic spikes and collapses all throughout the region. And these Arabic scholars, when he gets to Mecca, write down stories and legends about this guy who had so much gold he had no idea what to do with it. So he is seen traditionally as one of, if not the richest man of all time. But it's these Arabic scholars, Islamic scholars, who are going to write down stories about him. And that also can help to lead into more exploration of Africa, especially North Africa, to see where this guy came from, that he had so much access to so much wealth. That's how Mansa Musa got famous. Here's another representation of him, starting off in the city of Timbuktu and working their way through the deserts all the way to Cairo and then finally to Mecca across the Red Sea. He actually did not make it back. He died on the return journey, which plunged the Mali Empire and his capital city of Timbuktu into a time of darkness and despair. The last of the great West Coast empires is the Songhai Empire. They're going to start off as just an important town in the Mali Empire, but they rebel under the leadership of Sunni Ali and form their own. Sunni Ali and afterwards Askia Muhammad, his second in command, are never going to be defeated in battle. So they're going to have a lot of morale. A lot of people are going to want to join him just to say that they're winners, just like people kind of hopping on the bandwagon with different sports teams today. They're going to raise large armies and navies to help control their empire. And Sunni Ali is primarily responsible for starting the first center for Islamic learning, almost the first like college or university for Islam in the city of Timbuktu. Unfortunately, Morocco in the late 15 and early 1600s is going to use French weapons and the French army themselves to invade from the north and destroy and take over the Songhai Empire, which is going to be the last of the great ancient African empires. So this is Songhai. It's actually larger in terms of size and people than the Ghana and Mali Empire combined. This is Timbuktu. It almost looks like a sand castle. Almost looks like something made up out of a story. That is Sunni Ali. That is Askia Muhammad, the first of the two major rulers of the Songhai. Now we're transitioning to the south, the Mwenye Mutapa. Mwenye Mutapa are the first settlers in present-day Zimbabwe and are the descendants from the Shona people who still live there. They get their names from the large stone houses that are built called Zimbabwe's. The largest city was called Great Zimbabwe, which could have held up to 20,000 people, which is a remarkable size for a city at that time. The largest structure in the city was called the Great Enclosure, which is surrounded by an 800-foot wall that is built together with no record of cement or any other mortar substance to hold the wall together, just that well built. I'll show you some pictures of that in a second. However, for some reason, the Shona people mysteriously move away during the 1400s. And you know the only thing that they left behind were hundreds of thousands of cattle bones. So we can speculate that cattle is going to be a very, very important part of their economy as well, kind of like the Maasai people in Central Africa. But we just don't know. No written records, very difficult to tell what happened to them. So this is a region we're talking about. You see Mutapa and Great Zimbabwe right next to each other. This is an aerial photo of the Great Enclosure. This is what it looks like from the inside. So millions and millions of these tiny bricks all carved and put together expertly. Now we're going to go back to the east, which is going to be the part that is closest to Saudi Arabia, to the Middle East. Many ancient African civilizations traded their goods on the eastern coast of Africa in cities which are going to be controlled by Islamic Arabs and Persians who are from that region, around that area. The two most important cities in the area were Sofala and Mogadishu. Mogadishu is still the capital city of the present-day country of Somalia. And they developed a language for trading called Swahili, which is actually Arabic for coast. And it is still spoken in that region today. It's actually one of the more widespread languages in Africa. Very famous language. They're going to trade gold, ivory, rhino's horns, animal skins, tortoise shells, and actually live animals themselves. The locals are either going to be merchants, masons, shipbuilders, traders, etc. in those regions. And they're still very populated regions today. So these are all from Mogadishu. Some of the older buildings that are still left behind. Some of the ruins. An old Italian map. Newer influences in Africa, transitioning to a little bit newer time. One of the newer negative practices that began to take place in various places was the slave trade, which took place in Africa for centuries. The slave trade became international in the 1600s, and more than 10 million slaves were sold between the years of 1400 and 1800, tearing families and villages and tribes apart. Widespread trade did bring an influx of religions to the continent, such as Islam and Christianity, for better and for worse. So not all negative things. But the slave trade is definitely one of the things that we remember negatively about this time period. Is many people, and you can see here, are going to be brought from different regions. Most people are actually going to be brought to Central America, the Caribbean, and South America, in particular Brazil. And then the combination of the religions. Most of them in the north are going to be Islam. Most of them in the central and south are going to be Christian with some hybrids mixed in there. All right, pause this, take this mini quiz. We will go over it on the next portion to make sure that you guys are doing the things you need to do I'll make sure you guys get these correct answers. But do this yourself. Go back through your notes, answer these questions. I appreciate it, guys. Get your assignments done this week, and we will talk to you very soon.